On my wedding day, my sister threw champagne in my face, smashed my cake, and shouted across the room, "This is what you get for acting like you're better." My mother rushed to her side. "She just needs to let it out," she whispered, like my sister was the one who got hurt. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, holding the glass I never got to drink, watching the sugar flowers I'd spent months designing slide off the ruined cake and splatter on the floor. That night, I didn't sleep. I planned. And by the next morning, I'd revoked the tuition payment, froze the lease I'd co-signed for her, and set off a chain reaction no one in my family saw coming. You think weddings are about love? Mine was about finally drawing the line and daring someone to cross it. I never planned on being the successful one. It just sort of happened. While Amber was skipping class and changing majors every semester, I was clocking 70-hour weeks trying to get my biotech startup off the ground. I lived in a studio the size of a walk-in closet and ate cup noodles for 2 years straight. I said no to vacations, missed birthdays, and learned how to charm investors who called me sweetheart while doubting my projections. By 29, I had made something of myself. Not rich, but stable, comfortable, and finally, engaged. Her name was Sophie. We met at a fundraiser for a community lab I helped sponsor. She brought me tea when I lost my voice. I brought her soup when she lost her grandmother. We built something gentle, steady. Loving her was easy, which terrified me at first, but in the best way. When we decided to get married, I told Amber right away. She didn't say congratulations. She said, "Wow, must be nice." I offered to help with her tuition that month anyway. 0 cents in one payment. I also co-signed her lease that spring because she wasn't comfortable living with random roommates anymore. My parents were tight on money, so the weight fell on me, again. But I didn't complain. That's what big sisters do, right? We pick up the slack, we fix the mess, we fill in the blanks. Only this time, something felt off. Amber hadn't thanked me. Not for the money, not for the lease, not even for the job connection I sent her that she ghosted after one interview. She was distant during calls, snappy during texts. When I told her about the dress I picked for the wedding, she replied, "Just don't make it one of those all-lace I'm so pure things, kinda cringe." Still, I brushed it off. Because family. Because we were finally in a good place. Because this wedding was about joy, and I wasn't going to let old patterns cloud it. The week of the ceremony, she texted, "What time should I show up?" Not, "Can I help?" Not, "Do you need anything?" Just a one-line text like she was RSVPing to a work happy hour. I remember showing it to Sophie. She shrugged and said, "Let her be who she is. It's your day, not hers." If only I had listened more closely to the second part. Because Amber had already decided, if it couldn't be her day, then it wouldn't be mine either. The morning of the wedding, the world felt still. Not quiet still, like time itself had paused for me. The venue looked like something out of a dream. Ivory chairs lined up on a hilltop, soft strings playing in the distance, candlelight flickering against rows of champagne flutes. The ocean was visible from the ceremony space. The sky was clear. Sophie looked unreal in her dress simple, off-shoulder silk, her hair in soft waves. I remember thinking, I made it here. We made it here. Not just through the stress of planning, or the vendor drama, or the endless family politics, but through the mess of life, of surviving it. I was ready to let people celebrate us. For once, I was ready to stop fixing and start receiving. And for the first 2 hours, that's exactly what happened. People laughed. They hugged us. They danced to the pre-ceremony playlist I'd agonized over for weeks. Even my dad, who usually acts like he's allergic to emotions, teared up a little when Sophie and I exchanged vows. I could feel something shifting, like I'd finally built a life stable enough for love to land and stay. And then Amber showed up. 43 minutes late. She wore a backless gold dress so tight it looked spray-painted on. Her heels clicked like an entrance cue from a high school drama. She didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't even look around. Just grabbed a glass of champagne from the server and slipped into the far corner like she was watching someone else's party. When our eyes met just for a second, her gaze didn't soften. She didn't smile. She didn't even blink. She looked right through me. To most people there, it probably just looked like she was being dramatic. Maybe tired, maybe underdressed. But I knew better. That silence was familiar. Amber's silence was never passive. It was her opening act. The pause before the punchline. Sophie noticed too. She leaned over during cocktail hour and whispered, "Was Amber okay?" She seemed off. I nodded like it was fine. Because I wanted it to be. Because I needed it to be. My mom passed by with a plate of shrimp skewers and whispered, "She's just nervous. Weddings bring stuff up." As if that explained the ice in her tone. As if I hadn't been paying for that very same stuff for the last 3 years. Still, I chose to ignore it. Because I had built a perfect day. And I wasn't going to let my sister ruin it. At least, not yet. It happened during the toast. That perfect, glittering moment you dream about for months. I had just stood up. Sophie's hand was resting gently on my arm, the lights had dimmed slightly, and the soft hum of the jazz trio behind us felt like background music to a fairy tale. I raised my glass and smiled at the room. My wife and I. God, just saying those words gave me chills. Want to thank each of you for showing up, for witnessing this, for reminding us that love, when done right, feels like peace. I meant it. I was finally breathing in a life I'd built on purpose. And then, Amber stood up too. She was 3 tables away, near the dessert bar. For half a second, I thought maybe she was going to make a toast. Maybe this was her way of stepping into the light. My glass was still halfway to my lips when I saw her hand move. Not in a toast, but in a throw. The champagne flew through the air like a slow-motion arc from a movie. It hit the dessert table first. Glasses toppled, a tower of chocolate strawberries collapsed, and then the photo frame. A 5x7 of Sophie and me in Maui. Wind in our hair, arms around each other, grinning like kids in love. It shattered on impact, glass fragments catching the light. Amber didn't stop. She reached forward and, with both hands, shoved the 3-tier wedding cake like she was flipping a table. The room gasped. The cake didn't just fall, it crumbled. Buttercream roses smeared across the white linen. Sugar flowers snapped like dry twigs. The monogrammed cake topper rolled across the floor and stopped right at my feet. And then she screamed. Loud. Sharp. The kind of scream that cuts through music, conversation, even thought. "This is what you get for acting like you're better," it echoed. I swear I heard someone's phone buzz in the silence that followed. People froze. Some thought it was a joke. Others looked around for cameras, like maybe this was an elaborate prank. But I knew better. Amber wasn't performing. She was unraveling. My mom bolted from her seat and rushed to Amber like she'd just been hit by a car. Held her close. Whispered in her ear. "She just needs to let it out," she said to no one and everyone. The DJ stopped the music. The waitstaff stood motionless. My best friend clutched her champagne flute like it might be a weapon. Sophie leaned into me. "Do something," she whispered. But I didn't. Not because I was weak, but because I knew that if I moved, if I spoke, if I gave this moment anything, it would belong to Amber. So I looked at Sophie, gave the smallest nod to the coordinator, and let the storm pass without lifting a single finger. That night, the apartment was too quiet. Not peaceful, just hollow. Like the kind of silence you hear in a hotel hallway after a door slams. Sophie sat on the edge of the bed, still half in her dress. Mascara smudged under her eyes. She hadn't cried, not really, but she looked like someone who'd just watched the world tilt sideways. "Are you okay?" she asked. I nodded. Lie. I walked to the kitchen, poured 2 glasses of wine. The red one, with the label we'd saved for a celebration. It didn't taste like anything. We didn't talk much. Just sat, shoes off, hair undone, staring at each other across the coffee table like strangers in a waiting room. Around midnight, she changed into pajamas and crawled into bed. I didn't. I opened my laptop. No rage, no tears, just focus. Like my brain had flipped a switch into project mode. I pulled up the student portal first. Found the tuition deposit I'd made for Amber last month, 11-0. Clicked cancel. No confirmation prompt. No. Are you sure? Just a progress bar that turned green. Then I logged into the rental platform for the apartment I'd co-signed for her. Changed the password. Marked the lease as under review. Flagged her account as pending authorization. In 5 days, rent would be due. And she wouldn't be able to pay it. Not without me. I didn't do it out of revenge. I did it out of clarity. Because for the first time in years, I saw exactly what was happening and exactly what needed to stop. Amber wasn't spiraling. She was floating. On the life raft I kept building for her. Every emergency she had, I fixed. Every overdraft, every failed class, every I just need a little help, I covered it. And this wedding was the return on that investment. She wasn't angry because I ignored her. She was angry because I didn't center her. And when the spotlight wasn't hers, she decided to steal it no matter the cost. I stared at the screen for a long time after everything was done. Not triumphant, not even angry. Just still. Sophie had fallen asleep. I didn't wake her. I just sat by the window, watching the city lights blink in the distance, and thought, if no one's ever going to protect me from her, I guess I'll do it myself. At exactly 2:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Amber. Guess I made an impression tonight. I didn't answer. I turned my phone face down, and finally, slept. At exactly 8:40 a.m., my phone started buzzing. First a call, then 3 texts, then another call. Amber. I didn't answer. Instead, I poured coffee into the mug Sophie gave me on our 3rd date. It said "Hot Nerd" in big blue letters. I remember laughing when she handed it to me and her saying, "Well, if the mug fits." This morning, I wasn't laughing. I sipped slowly and stared at the sun hitting the edge of our kitchen window like nothing had happened. Like last night wasn't a war zone in satin. Buzz. Text 4. Why is the portal locked? I can't access anything. Buzz. Text 5. Did you do this? I didn't reply. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I was free. Like someone had cut the final thread that tied me to the role I'd been playing for a decade. Fixer, buffer, emotional landfill. Sophie walked out, hair messy, robe half-tied. Did she really text you already? I just handed her the phone. She read, raised one eyebrow, then handed it back without saying a word. Text 6 came in 10 minutes later. Fix this. No more emojis. No more smiley face bravado. Just one short command, like she still believed I was programmed to obey. I muted my phone and started making breakfast. Not because I was hungry, but because I wanted the scent of something ordinary: eggs, toast, sizzling butter to remind me that my life was real, that it was mine, and that last night was not a beginning of a feud. It was the end of an era. At noon, my mom called. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Your sister's very upset. She feels abandoned. Call me. The irony of that word abandoned almost made me laugh. Was I not abandoned every time I co-signed and she ghosted rent day? Every time I bailed her out of overdrafts and she didn't say thank you? Every time she sobbed on the phone and I cleared my calendar, only to be replaced by silence the next week? But now I was the villain. For drawing a line. For finally asking, what about me? Amber didn't message again that day. Not until the next evening, when she showed up outside our apartment. She didn't knock once and wait politely. She pounded. Loud, repetitive, angry knocks like she was trying to summon a fight. I watched from the hallway as Sophie checked the peephole. She's alone, she said. Then opened the door just enough. Amber didn't say hi. Didn't ask to come in. She launched straight into demands. Rent was due in 4 days. Her summer job money was gone. She was banking on the tuition refund, and I had no right to sabotage her future. She said I had a moral obligation, that I couldn't just yank support like that without warning. Sophie tilted her head. Oh, she warned you, just not in words. You just didn't listen. Amber blinked, confused. Sophie stepped into the hallway, closed the door behind her, and said, You ever pull a stunt like that again if you show up uninvited, if you try to guilt her, if you ever speak to her the way you did that night, I will call the police. Understand? Amber scoffed. You're bluffing. Sophie didn't answer. She grabbed a handful of Amber's hair and pushed her back down the hall. Not with rage. Just quiet, decisive force. Amber shrieked. But Sophie didn't flinch. She turned, walked inside, and locked the door. I stood in the living room, stunned. Not because of what Sophie did, but because for the first time in my life, Someone had defended me without hesitation, without asking me to be the bigger person, without making it my job to keep the peace. 10 minutes later, my dad called. I picked up, expecting a calm voice. What I got was a sigh. "Rachel, we need to talk about your sister." I waited. He continued, "She's spiraling. She made a mistake. She's young. This isn't who she is." "She's 22, I said. "She's exactly who she is." He sighed again. "You're older. You should know better than to punish her for one moment." "One moment?" I said. "That wasn't a moment. That was a pattern. You just didn't want to see it." I hung up before he could say family unity. Because I knew what no one in my family had the courage to admit. Amber wasn't falling apart. She was just finally falling. And this time, I wasn't going to catch her. The shift was subtle at first. Like someone adjusting the thermostat in a room you don't notice right away, but suddenly, you're sweating. After the confrontation outside our apartment, Amber went quiet for 3 days. No texts. No phone calls. Not even one of her infamous emoji mood updates. And then, the group chat happened. It started with a text from my dad. "Let's have an honest talk. No yelling, no blocking. We are still a family." I should have left it unread. But curiosity got the better of me. He had added me, Sophie, my mom, and of course Amber. A digital hostage situation. Amber was first to speak. Said she was deeply hurt by the way she'd been treated. Claimed she acted out at the wedding because she felt invisible. Said she just wanted someone to acknowledge how forgotten she'd felt. It was a masterclass in selective storytelling. No mention of the cake. No mention of the scream. No mention of 11-0 intuition or the lease I'd co-signed. Then my mom chimed in. "She's still your baby sister. She's figuring things out. She didn't mean to ruin anything." I stared at the screen. Let those lines echo. Because they weren't just about Amber, they were about me. I'd stopped being the daughter. I was now the obstacle. The problem? The cold one. Sophie left the group chat with no message. Just the notification. "Sophie has exited the conversation." I smiled. Then I typed my reply. Just 3 sentences. "She's not a baby. She's 22. And she needs to learn the cost of disrespect." And then I muted the thread. I didn't block anyone. I didn't respond to the follow-up texts. I didn't rise to the bait. Because I had finally realized something no therapist, podcast, or self-help book had ever quite said out loud. When you're raised to be the responsible one, setting a boundary feels like betrayal. But it isn't. It's survival. My parents weren't asking for peace. They were asking for silence. For compliance. For me to go back to making things easy again. But I was done. Done being the emotional buffer. Done being the ATM. Done playing the role of the strong one while my sister was handed every excuse in the book. If they wanted to keep enabling her, that was their choice. But they'd have to do it without me. A day later, my cousin Kara texted me a photo from my dad's birthday party. Amber was there, wearing white, next to some real estate guy she'd apparently met on Bumble 2 weeks earlier. The caption said, "She told people they're moving in together," also kept saying big things are coming, like she's launching a product. I didn't respond. Because I already knew what the big thing was. And it wasn't love. It wasn't growth. It was a podcast. It dropped on a Monday morning. I was brushing my teeth when Sophie called from the kitchen. You're gonna want to see this." She held up her phone with a grimace, and there it was. Amber's face, filtered and flawless, on a black and white Instagram teaser. Title across the screen in all caps. "Silver Sister Syndrome, Growing Up with the Golden Child." I laughed. At first, because it sounded like parody. Like satire from a comedy sketch show about toxic family dynamics. But it wasn't a joke. Amber had launched a real podcast. And I was the villain. In the voiceover, she whispered things like, "I thought weddings were about love. But sometimes, the most painful betrayals come with champagne." She described an older sister who always held money over her head, who weaponized stability and made her feel like a charity case instead of family. She didn't name me, but she didn't have to. Every story, every reference, every carefully edited metaphor pointed straight at me like a knife with my initials engraved on the handle. The episode ended with a thank you to her sponsor, a therapy app, the exact one I had introduced her to a year ago, when she called me sobbing in a bar bathroom, saying she couldn't breathe. I stared at the screen for a long time after that. Not angry, not hurt, just unnerved. Like I was being erased and redrawn by someone who knew exactly how I used to look. That night, Sophie and I sat on the balcony with wine. She played the episode through her phone speaker while I listened in silence. When it ended, she set the phone down, took a sip, and said, "She's not healing, she's branding." And she was right. Amber wasn't processing anything. She was packaging it, turning our family into content, pain into profit. The next day, she sent me an email. Subject line, "Let's talk." The body was short, polite, deceptively calm. "I'd like to meet. No drama, just a conversation. I have things I want to tell you. I think you'll be proud of me." Sophie read it twice and muttered, "She's not trying to reconnect. She's baiting you for content." I replied with one line, "Sophie will be there too." Amber never responded, but I knew that wasn't the end. Because people like Amber don't stop when they're tired. They stop when the story isn't selling. And from the looks of it, she had at least 2 more episodes left in her. 2 days after that email, my parents showed up unannounced. 7:15 p.m. Just as Sophie and I were sitting down to dinner, takeout Thai, extra peanut sauce. They didn't call. They didn't text. Just rang the bell like it was a casual visit, like the last 6 months hadn't happened. I opened the door halfway. My dad gave a little wave. My mom already had her purse on her shoulder, like she'd planned to stay. "We just want to talk," she said, calmly. "You have 3 minutes," I replied. They walked in anyway. Sophie stayed in the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes locked. No fake smile, no polite nod. She didn't need to say a word, her presence alone drew the line. My mom spoke first. She said Amber was going through a transformative season, that she had deep regrets, that the podcast was just her way of processing. Then my dad added, "She wants a relationship with you. She just doesn't know how to say it." I asked, "Did she actually say that?" Silence. That told me everything. They weren't mediating. They were managing. I asked the question I'd been holding for months. "Have either of you told her what she did at the wedding was wrong?" My mom looked uncomfortable. My dad glanced at the floor. "She was overwhelmed," my mom murmured. "She didn't mean to ruin anything," my dad offered. "But she did," I said, "and no one told her." They didn't respond. So I kept going. "I'm done," I told them. With the money, with the guilt, with pretending I don't see what's happening. I told them if they wanted to keep funding her life, that was their choice. But it wouldn't be with my name, my credit, or my silence. "You raised a daughter who believes consequences don't apply to her," I said, "and now you're upset that I've stopped cleaning up the mess." I asked them to leave. And, surprisingly, they did. Amber didn't reach out after that. But 2 more podcast episodes dropped. One called Narcissistic Siblings. Another, When They Make You Look Crazy. Sophie and I laughed at that last one. Not because it was funny, but because it was so transparent. A few weeks later, I checked our lease. 8 months left. I looked at our savings, opened a new tab, and said, "Let's go somewhere far, somewhere warm, somewhere that has absolutely nothing to do with any of this." We booked 2 round-trip tickets to Costa Rica. No layovers, no drama, just us. Before we left, Amber sent one last text. Just a fire emoji. No words. No explanation. Sophie looked at it and said, "Perfect, let it burn." I blocked the number. That was the last thread. The last tap on the glass. When we came back from that trip, we moved into a smaller apartment closer to trees, further from obligation. I changed my email. Opened a new account. Started saying no without guilt. We never talked about the wedding again. Because we didn't need to. Some stories don't need closure. They just need an ending. And sometimes, the cleanest goodbyes are the ones you never say out loud. There comes a point in life, especially as we get older, when we realize that peace is more valuable than approval. This story isn't just about a ruined wedding or family drama. It's about the courage to stop rescuing people who don't want to grow, and the quiet strength it takes to walk away without needing to be right. As adults, many of us have been taught to prioritize harmony over honesty, to keep the peace, to forgive endlessly. But real wisdom sometimes looks like setting a boundary and letting it hold. Rachel's story reminds us, being the responsible one doesn't mean being the sacrificial one. Letting go of toxic pattern 7 with family isn't cold, it's necessary. If you've ever carried the weight for everyone else, this story will speak to your soul. Let us know in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away from someone for your own peace? If this resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe for more honest stories like this and help us reach more people who need to hear. You're allowed to choose yourself.